So this lecture is on why IPR matters. Generally, one question which comes in our mind that why there is a need for IPR, and if we can sort this topic from why IPR matters to why IPR, then we can really find out that what are the reasons, what are the motivations which really helps the owners to get intellectual property rights. And it is very important today to understand why IPR matters, because there are many points to understand today. One of the point is IPRs basically includes the innovation. It helps in international trade today, especially after the TRIPS agreement, trade related intellectual property rights agreement signed in the last round of the general agreement on tariff and trade, that is called GATT. We have seen that intellectual property rights became one of the most debatable topic in the last round of the Uruguay talk. And after that, since trade and intellectual property is interconnected, so we cannot avoid to really bring this discussion to this course also. So the trade and innovation, the two topics are again interlinked, and we find that without discussing trade, we cannot really understand why IPR is important. Then the third point is the culture, because IPR is not only the patent, not only the copyright, not only the trademark. We are going to learn a special lecture on, we are going to have the special lecture on the types of IPR very soon after this lecture, or you can again find out that the culture is an important aspect which is related to intellectual property rights. Then business and consumer protection. The intellectual property rights are not only the rights for the owning of such intellectual property, but it has the business implications, and we cannot avoid the business aspect and the consumer aspect related to intellectual property rights. We'll have a very short discussion on this topic also. And then IPR and society. Ultimately, who holds this ownership? It is the individual. Sometimes it is not only the individual, but the society in terms of geographical indication, or in terms of traditional knowledge. It is not only a person, but it is the society as a whole, which has the right to protect the interest of the owner, and they holds, basically the society as a whole holds the intellectual property ownership. Again, we are today more industry linked. Our activities and the business activities are more profit oriented, and we cannot really see that there is a mismatch. We cannot see that there should be a mismatch between the intellectual property rights, which has a very great concern with the academic community, research and development community, R&D community today, and which has direct linkage with the industry. When we talk about the intellectual property rights, we cannot avoid the discussion on employment, because when an owner is having patent rights, or the owner is really able to protect trademark, they cannot really avoid the employment generated through such intellectual property rights. We can also discuss a little bit on employment issue. And then economic growth and competitiveness. Intellectual property right basically stops the infringement of the owner's right on intellectual property, and it also gives you certain rights to control the intellectual property for years. For example, in case of patent or in case of copyright, these are very time centric, and you have the right to control that product for some time. So the company is sometime the monopoly company in the world. It has the right to control the product, and such activities are, if it is legally monopolized, then such activities are really helping the firm to grow faster and faster. And if such opportunities are in the hand of in the hand of a particular country. If a country is really active in patent rights, really active in trademark, really active in having more and more copyrighted material, in that case that country will certainly have more and more capacity to grow faster compared to those countries where the rights of patent, rights of trademark, rights of copyright is really weak, and people are not really, or the R&D and academic activities and the industrial output is not really linked with the IP related products. So let me begin this discussion with introducing again the matter of intellectual property rights. As I have mentioned in my first lecture, that intellectual property right is one of the legal right. So countries have laws to protect intellectual property for two main reasons. The first reason is to give the legal interpretation to the moral and economic rights of the creator for their creations, and the rights of the public in access and the use of those creations. And the second is to encourage creativity and the diffusion and application of its results, and to support fair trading, which would become which is really advanced to economic and social development. So we cannot really say that a world today, the world cannot be without IPR. The world cannot be without IPR, and because most of the intellectual property related discussion today, it really helps countries' economic development, economic growth. It helps society to really protect their knowledge, traditional knowledge, and their many traditional products. So we cannot really say that a country can survive or the economy can survive today without the help of intellectual property rights. So in the broader sense, other universal social goals are also confirmed by the competent intellectual property enforcements. Beside the economic ends, intellectual property is protected, transmitted, and implemented by a strong intellectual property laws in the world today. As I have mentioned in my introductory lecture, that many local economies are really complementing the intellectual property rights laws at the global level, which came after the enforcement of WTO. So severe health hazards can be mitigated by the enforcement of strong IP rights, and eventually can help in improving public health. So the World Trade Organization and other WIPO and other international bodies are really focusing today that even if pharmaceutical industry is really controlled through the patent rights, we have the way out to help the public health issue. So it's not only the intellectual property right is not only to monopolize the profits, but it also helps the countries to have a very transparent and very clear-cut conditions to understand that in which direction the world is going and which direction we are really able to protect the public issues and social issues. So the first point which I would like to really discuss here is how IPR and innovation is interlinked. So what is basically linkage between the innovation and IPR? Effective protection of IPR is an essential goal of the government for encouraging innovation. So innovation normally desires considerable investment in education, R&D, and labor for bringing new ideas to the marketplace. So innovation is not sudden. When we say innovation, innovation needs a level playing field. Innovation needs basic infrastructure, basic physical infrastructure, as well as the basic social infrastructure. So if we see today the world which is really innovative in nature, especially some of the countries like newly emerging economies like Singapore, Korea, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and some of the developed country which had a great intellectual property base today, we are finding that those economies were very much interested for many years for the education, their R&D, and making their workforce very skilled enough to really produce some of the intellectual property rights. So depriving the innovators' ability to recover the cost of the investment in innovation, there will be very less incentive for the creators. So if intellectual property products are produced and if there is a large number of infringement because of the poor law, or if there is a large number of piracy going on, in that case the intellectual property owner is not getting any economic incentive, and in that case innovation will not be really motivated. So to protect the interest of the innovator and to protect the rights of the innovations, it is very much important to really have a very clear cut law framed by the country, and as per the global agreement today, that these law should be complementary to protect the interest of the innovations. So this is the first point which I would like which I wanted to discuss here, that IPR and innovation is interlinked. A better intellectual property rights can really help to protect the interest of the innovators. A weak intellectual property rights systems cannot really help to protect the interest of the innovators. So the patent and innovation, if for example if we can say how innovation is linked with the patents, patent safeguards inventions and innovations such as new drugs, industrial products, industrial design, manufacturing process, high-tech products and chemical compounds, etc. So economic incentive is granted through patents for taking risk and time involved in R&D. So if a person is or a firm is having patent rights, it cannot be owned due to the R&D of few days, but it needs huge investment in terms of time, in terms of money, in terms of thinking, in terms of dedicating a group of the people. So if economic incentives are not there, why people will invest their time, why people will invest their money, why people will have rethinking on many research and development issues. So such innovations are protected through the patents. That is the point which I am making here, and then public receives the benefits of that innovation. So remember the Adam Smith's invisible hand theory. A firm is patenting, thinking that if the patent rights will be granted, then the firm will be having lots of business and lots of economic incentive. But in return, but there is a benefit to the society, because society which is using that medicine, which is using that drugs, they are directly benefited through the patent, through the ownership which a firm is having. The firm is producing something for getting the economic benefit, but at the same time the third party involved in that consumption is getting the benefit directly, and such way there is such activities which really helps the people to get the benefit from the innovations. So a strong IP protection will not only encourage innovations, but it also provide confidence in an economy that will help in attracting FDI and ensures technology transfers. But it cannot be the firm or the innovator or the consumer cannot be really benefited without the strong intellectual property rights system. So a strong intellectual property rights system is the key to protect the interest of the innovators. If that strong intellectual property right protection is not available, then lots of investment, lots of R&D activity, and the involvement of the researcher and scientists and the innovators are basically discouraged, because such infringement and piracy basically mislead them in future to protect their product. So if we can summarize the benefits of the strong patent framework, the first benefit is it helps in increasing global trade and commerce, because the moment you have the patent rights, you have the monopoly on that product for many years, and you are in the position to produce that product and to sell that product in any part of the world. So if the world is really having a free and liberalized and globalized framework of trading system, then the products are really products are really moving from one country to other country. So the first point is, the first important point is the trade and business. The second important point is the FDI. So foreign direct investment. So countries are looking for those economies where they can really have more skilled manpower, more scientific pool, and so through that investment they can come out with a new innovative products. So it really stimulates the investment opportunities by the foreigners, and a country which has more manpower, skilled labor, and scientific pool, and those countries are really getting benefits of the foreign investments, because the investors are coming, starting their research and development activities, and then those products are really when new items are really created or new innovations are really made, then those innovations are again really matter for the patent rights. So granting of new patent, increasing the local production. So if a product is patented, certainly in that domestic economy you will certainly have more and more product coming out, because you have the patent rights. So after getting the patent rights, if you are granted the patent rights, you are sure that you are going to work in the market. You are very much confident that you are going to sell the product in the market. So certainly that is going to really help the local production in a very increasing scale. So it really really leads to the higher growth and economic development. So when you have the FDI coming in, when you have more production going on, and certainly you will have economic growth of that particular economy, and you will certainly have economic development also, because when you have more skilled power, more skilled productive mechanism, more strong IP protection law, you have the benefits of the patent. If you have loose intellectual property protection system, you don't have the benefits of FDI. You will lose the benefits of FDI. Foreign investors will not really, they will not be really interested to come in, and that will really hamper the production, because if the firms are not really able to protect their innovation, the firms are really discouraged to produce also. So it hampers the economic growth and economic development. So when we are discussing today why IPR matters, we cannot really ignore the discussion that IPR matters, because IPR leads innovation. The patents are leading to the innovations, because there are certain benefits of the strong patent framework. So the second point is, if you can just see here some of the data, there is a need to universalize the patent protection. Some 9 US patent protected products were either denied or repealed in India in 2012, and this creates global concern for the protection of intellectual property rights today. So there is a need to protect the patent rights at the local level, especially a country like India and other developing countries needs a further protection of intellectual property rights. So the second important point, is to discuss the trade and intellectual property right linkages. So safeguard and enforcement of intellectual property is crucial for a country's ability to stimulate innovations and to compete in the global trading environment, because intellectual property rights supports creativity, innovation and invention, and that is essential for manufacturing of new products. So this facilitates trade by introducing new products in the global market. The moment you have the new product, the moment you have the new innovation, you have the new product coming to the market, and when you have the new product coming to the market, you have the new market coming up. So new innovation, new product, and new market, new consumer. You are finding the new consumer. So you have the new consumer coming up. So all these combinations cannot be really traced out. If you have the old innovation, then you have the old product, you have the old market, you have the old consumer. So instead of new, if you will change this new if you are writing here, if I am writing here old innovation, old product, old market, then the consumer will be automatically the old consumer, not the new consumer. So what is the difference between the old and new? The old and new is nothing except the new intellectual property rights which you are adding today, the new IPR. So this new IPR or the new innovations is leading you in the world of new product, and that makes you to really look for the new market, and that gives you the opportunity to catch the new consumer. So consumers are available, but it doesn't mean that all consumers are ready to consume the products. To motivate the consumer, to stimulate the consumption in the market, you have to have the new innovations going on, and that new innovation is really leading to the new market. And certainly such intellectual property rights are engine of the economic growth today. So the intellectual property rights facilitates trade by introducing new product in the global market, which I have discussed through this interconnections. Some of the examples are very much clear today, that 74% of all United States products exports is based on the intellectual property, and this is almost $1 trillion. So mega free trade agreements like Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement is going to promote free trade, but intellectual property rights are crucial under these negotiations. So we cannot really ignore the fact that today world is very much critical on the protection of intellectual property rights, and even the new free trade agreements cannot ignore such facts, and so trade and intellectual property rights are interlinked in a very different way today. When we say culture, we cannot really forget the copyright and culture interlinkage. So intellectual property protection serves ends like cultural development and preservation, as well as economic and social well-being. So local cultures can be at risk without a strong copyright protection. So artistic work by local and indigenous people, authors, musicians and other must be supported by the legal framework and enforcement. So illegal sale of cheap or free music, movies and books can be strongly prohibited to protect local culture. So we are finding today that lots of copying of the music, copying of the local dance, copying of the indigenous people's culture is made by other countries' people, and people are objecting to such piracy, because such products, such activities, such culture is not really well protected by the local economy. So some of the products, local products, some of the local arts are really those arts which cannot be really copied by others, because the moment you are copying it and selling it in the name of the real arts of those of that place, you are basically making fool to other consumers of the world. And some of the examples are some of the paintings from India, which is really pirated today by other countries in the name of the art created by that particular producers and firms. But the fact is that those arts are the local arts, and which has nowadays which has local protection going on through the Geographical Indication Registration Office, and also through the Copyright Protection Act. We cannot ignore the interlinkage of the business and consumer protection, which is also one of the important point. I have already mentioned that the world is after having the new IPR regime, world is really looking for the new innovations, new product and new market. So such new markets cannot be really traced, really controlled without having a proper protection, consumer protection. So the trademark or other intellectual property rights sometimes really protects the interest of the consumer and the businessman. So products are identified and differentiated from others on the basis of trademarks today. So it serves as an indicator of the quality of the products, not only for the businessman but also for the consumer. So some of the illegal use of trademarks cheat consumers, and guarantee of the quality and accountability of the products is completely lost in this process. Health and safety of the people too is threatened due to the counterfeit trademarks. So when we say consumer protection in business, intellectual property has an important role to play. So enforcement of intellectual property rights can facilitate consumers in making well-informed selections about the protection and trustworthiness and efficacy of the purchases. So intellectual property rights, especially trademarks or the geographical indications, it promotes assurance that consumers' demand and producer supply is in equilibrium in the markets. So the moment such intellectual property rights are not really protected, then the businessman is also ready to cheat consumers, and consumers are also not aware that what type of products he or she is consuming, which is available in the market. So the next point is the intellectual property rights and the society. It has become very essential to remind the role of intellectual property protection in our day-to-day life. More specifically, in the developing world, pharmaceuticals have become one of the severe and fatal problem around the globe. This is very serious issue and it needs the protection of the societies. For the societies a strong need, but the strong IPR is needed to protect the pharmaceutical companies' interest. Some of the other associated issues like patent, plant variety protection, by piracy, cloning, genetic modification, genetic engineering, all are in place today, and in the current condition of the weak IPR protection in many countries, there are large number of by piracy the cases of genetic modification is going on, and gene piracy is also going on. So this shows that the society is also facing certain risk. Indira Gandhi Agriculture University in Chhattisgarh has pointed out that the state had around 2,600 variety of rice, which has reduced to the 200 variety of rice today. So this shows that there is a decline in the traditional crops, traditional variety, but at the same time they have also pointed out that some of the farms, some of the people from some developed country, they have also tried to have the bipiracy or genetic piracy, gene piracy of those rice, and that is very sad news for us in terms of biodiversity, in terms of genetic richness. We are really different from other part of the world, but due to the absence of the strong IPR regimes, we are facing such problem today. So society as a whole, especially in developing and least developed country, is on risk, and in that case we have to have a very strong IP base and IP protection system. So why intellectual property rights is important? Because intellectual property rights is able to take care of the society's traditional knowledge and the society's biodiversity and some of the risk which is involved in cloning and genetic engineering and etc. So some of the global challenges are in the field of health and medicines, agriculture and environment. About 300 drugs came under the WHO essential drug list, are the outcome of intensive research and development, are backed by the patent protection. Agriculture, agro-based companies are innovating new products and new seeds to facilitate farmers to produce more to alleviate global hunger and malnutrition. Environment, innovation in non-conventional energy and green technologies can help in improving the energy security and tackle the issue of climate change with the help of intellectual property. So, industry academia linkage, which is also one of the important point for the intellectual property rights discussion, and industrially relevant knowledge for the industry and the skills at affordable cost has become more significant in the globalized world today. So, the present condition of industry, university, academia, research and development institutions linkage is not strong enough to cater the needs of the globe. So, IPR matters because intellectual property rights gives an opportunity to have a tie-up with the academic institutions and the research and development labs for the larger interest of the nations and to increase the competitiveness of the global industry. There remain several institutional challenges which has to be looked into, and IPR is one of the opportunity for the industry academia linkage. So, IPR matters because it provides an opportunity to have a real tie-up between the industry and academia. One of the important and interesting point is the employment today. Many countries, developing and less developed countries, including developed countries, are facing the unemployment problem today. So, intellectual property generates and supports high paid employments. There is no doubt that when R&D activities are going to increase, and when the patents and trademarks and other intellectual property rights are going to have a better world in terms of consumption and business, the world is really going to get more and more jobs through the new product, innovation of the new products and designing and manufacturing of the new products for the world market. So, more than 55 million people are getting employment in intellectual property based industries in United States. This estimate shows that how normal workers in the IP based industry in US be paid some 30% more than the non-IP industry workers. So, this is also one of the point to notice that if a country like United States is able to employ more and more workers, it means that the IP sector, IPR sector, the intellectual property rights and intellectual property related product sector is going to give us more return in terms of employment or in terms of income, and those incomes and those employments are not low paid, but it is high paid. So, one can also see here the linkage between the IPR and economic growth, as we have mentioned here also and here also. The protection of IPR really helps for more and more innovations, which increasing the productivity, and that leads to the economic growth. So, for more detail, you can just watch this video available on the YouTube, and how it is really helping the competitiveness, because the importance of intellectual property can be traced through some instances. Value of United States intellectual property is $5.8 trillion. This is simply higher than any country's nominal gross domestic product. Moreover, share of US intellectual property based industries is 38% of the GDP, and likewise more than 40% of the United States economic growth and employment have the direct or indirect effect of innovation and inventions. So, how it happens? It happens through the involvement in R&D activities, and lots of competitiveness is really brought through the intellectual property rights product. So, how it leads to the competitiveness? Because it gives you a fair chance, intellectual property gives a firm or a country a fair chance to compete with the other firms and other country of the world in that particular field, because you have the legal right to fight with the competition. So, those who are not having the legal right, they will not be able to compete, because if they have to compete, they have to come out with a legally new product and legally intellectually protected new products, and if they are really able to help, really able to invest in R&D, they will be able to come out with the new products. So, this is one of the example from one country. Like that, one can also look into the data statistics of some other countries like Singapore, Korea, Taiwan, Japan, and one can find out that how intellectual property products are contributing in their GDP, and the share of IP products in the total GDP, in the nominal GDP is currently growing higher and higher. So to conclude, intellectual property provides a strong incentives for innovation and inventions. It provides an opportunity to have more and more innovations for any society. It converts innovative ideas and the creative design and other intangible assets into the valuable business assets. So intellectual property rights is integral to the rule of law and good governance. One cannot really think that intellectual property rights will be available without having a proper or a strong rule of the law and the good governance. Slowly now it is also considered that it promotes the public health and safety by combating fake goods available in the market. And as we have discussed in detail that intellectual property rights helps in economic growth and economic development, and that leads to the quality of products and quality of life in the world today. Thank you very much.